Welcome to the S.O.A.P.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the S.O.A.P. We are starting 2018 with our very first episode, a look at 2017. This episode we're going to go back, have a look at what we learnt, what we're going to try and do for the future, and just talk a bit in general about everything that's happened to us over the course of the last year. So I am Daniel, I'm joined by Aaron and Mike. How are you guys?
Buongiorno.
Good evening. Very well, thanks, Dan. So, 12 months. Doesn't seem like that long.
Yeah, it does.
Some days, and then some other days it seems like it's twice as long.
Every day.
Yeah, when we're actually doing the recordings, it goes very quick, but when the editing happens, it seems to take a lot longer.
Yeah, that's like the washing up at the end of the meal. It's the thing that no one ever wants to do, but it has to get done anyway, isn't it?
That's a perfect analogy for it. So, I guess we start with where we began a year ago. So, we actually did our first recording back on February 16th. So, a little bit over a year from this one. Aaron, I guess, do you remember why we started this podcast?
Well, yeah, I do. We were sort of concerned about the state of gaming and pop culture news in Australia with the demise of the ABC's Good Game. And sort of, a loss of mainstream recognition for the culture that we so dearly love and live every day. So we thought, bugger it, let's get together and talk smack about games and stuff. So that's what we did. And over the course of the year, we certainly learnt a few things. We learnt that there was quite a few people out in the podcasting space in Australia. We've made some friends. Dan, you've guested on a few different podcasts and episodes of guys.
Sure have.
So we've really come a long way, and just a few guys that wanted to keep talking about games and hear some news and talk about want of a better term, the nerdy stuff that they got up to on the weekend. And here we are, 12 months later. So we're still going and still doing nerdy stuff on the weekends.
So, yeah, we grabbed a couple of us that were hanging around watching that kind of content and that. Me, I'm more of the general person. Aaron, you're definitely our tech guy. Especially the old retro stuff. You're definitely the expert in that kind of area. Mike, we know what you're the expert at.
Voices.
It is voices. Give us a couple of your best voices, mate.
You've got me on the spot here. Listen to me, time to go. Everybody hike up your skirts and go, aye.
That is definitely why we got him.
All right, what about this Owen Wilson thing in Melbourne or something the other day? And they're all like, wow. Copying Owen Wilson's wow. Like in every movie he'll go, wow. And it's quite funny listening to the radio, and they're all doing this. The radio host was saying, like over 100,000 people there doing this Owen Wilson, like, wow. And then they're like, after about 5 minutes, they're all like looking at each other going, what are we doing with our lives?
They never got that answer.
First world problems. Wow.
The files are in the computer.
Shanghai Nights. Wow.
So that's why we got Mike on there. If we don't cut him off, he will go forever.
Well, he's also our beta tester.
I am.
He can break anything.
The breaker. I am the wrecker.
Nobody has ever broken as much technology as Mike. Although I did see recently Linus did a video on putting your GPU in the oven to fix it.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a very interesting video.
I thought about doing that to an old one I had once. And then my wife pointed out the fact that she didn't really want me to poison us the next time we cook dinner, because it releases lots of horrible fumes from the solder and the components on the board. So Pro tip, if you are going to bake something, make sure you get like an old oven and do it out the back.
Yeah.
In the shed.
Do it in a barbecue.
An old electric oven or something. Don't use your home oven because you will possibly die horribly.
The good thing is he did actually manage to really emphasize that during his video, which I think, considering he was going off what other people had talked about and their experiences, and he was replicating what they were doing, it really could have been they say to do this, I'll try this, and not explain that, and then had, millions of viewers suddenly poisoning themselves.
It would have been a slow poisoning.
Isn't that how cults start? Or finish? That's how cults finish, isn't it?
Finish.
Everybody, we're going to put something in the oven.
I have no idea what you're talking about. So we'll just move past that. But maybe there's an idea for Mike for one of our episodes in the future, is we can have Mike baking computer parts.
I'll be like Jamie Oliver, and we're like, I'm going to put this thing, it's got a CPU, right? I'm going to put a CPU at 350 degrees, and then we're going to go and see what it smells like. Something like that.
I think we've got the episode right there. So yeah, like I said, we started recording back on February 16th. We didn't actually get the episode out until the 26th of February. So it did take us a while to get that edited and polished up. We ended up doing a total of 18 episodes across the year. We did aim for a little bit higher, but we found that we learnt so much during it, and we changed a lot of things as we went on throughout the year. The way that we recorded, the content that we were doing, the format of the podcast. If you go back to episode 1 compared to episode 18, there's a huge difference, and we like to look at that as the journey that we took over the year, and hopefully this year is more stable, more standard, but a higher quality as a result of what we did learn over that year. So 18 episodes. We had 6 people participate. So we had the 3 of us that are on this one that were a part of it. And then we also had Arthur and Cav, regulars who couldn't make it tonight. We have asked them to put in a quick message though, so you should hear that during this episode. And we also had Mick guest on the episode. Mick was one of the listeners that we had. He reached out to us about an idea, and we invited him on to participate as a result of the feedback and the request that he had done, which was actually quite a great episode. If we all remember, Aaron, you were on that one, I believe.
Yeah, that was our virtual reality episode. It was pretty cool actually. We got to talk about some fancy new tech and some things I'd played with through the year, and where we think it's going to go. So if you haven't listened to it, get on there and have a listen to it, and have a listen to Mick as well. So one of the listeners that wanted to have a crack and came to us with an idea, and got on there, and we did an episode about it.
The best thing about that episode, because he actually ended up recording it with the same technology that I was using at the same location, and we'd said to him beforehand, like, give us a look at the stuff that you're using. We'll have a play around with it just to make sure we know everything. By the time we actually got started, we didn't get to have a play around. So the entire podcast, he actually had the VR headset on and was playing it the entire time. So viewers may not have been aware of that, but he was a little bit preoccupied during the whole thing, but still managed to have some great input on the episode. So big shout out to Mick, and thank you for joining us on that episode. I do hope to get you back on for another episode in the future. We did reach out to Mick to put a little message in as well, so we're hoping to have that at the end of this episode as well. Next thing I guess we talk about is the stats that we got. They're a bit humble. We're not as big as the Big Name podcast, but we also haven't had any budget. Have a stab at what kind of stats we've got, Aaron.
I'm going to go with where's what's his name sitting? Epic Mealtime are just over 100 million subscribers, so I reckon we probably came in behind those guys around maybe 50 million. No, probably very much more humble than that. And I do joke, it would be nice to get one of those diamond buttons from YouTube. But probably around...
Is it a real diamond?
No, you've actually got to pay for it as well, which sucks balls. So you've got to buy the diamond play button with your sweet YouTube money once you make it. Anyway, I digress. Around the 100, 200 mark, I would say. Probably there. Maybe... I don't know, couple of thousand views on YouTube, because we do sort of package up the podcast and do it as a YouTube broadcast as well. So a couple of hundred views there, maybe a couple of thousand, and over SoundCloud. So I really wouldn't know. I would hope that each episode got bigger and bigger. So from humble beginnings with just a few listeners, that we went to maybe 100 or 2 on each of the episodes by the end of the year last year. But I'm not really exactly sure what the numbers are, but I'm sure you've got them there, Dan. So
I sure do.
Put us out of our misery, mate.
It is my misery, isn't it? All right, so oddly you mentioned about the views going up. Episode 1 was actually one of our more popular ones. But to start with the basic stats, Facebook, we got over 100 likes, people following the page, participating on posts, that kind of stuff. So 100 people were liking the page. YouTube, we only had over 50 subscribers. We did actually have a lot more views than that through YouTube. We had a total of 5,086 minutes playtime,
Nice.
which is a lot more than I expected.
Yeah, that's pretty
We
good.
had a total of 1,412 views across all content, both podcasts, unboxings, everything that we did. We got 21 likes per dislike, which was quite a good ratio in my opinion. And our most popular video through YouTube was actually our unboxing of the K27-2 HLE, the monitor unboxing that we did, if you remember that one, Aaron.
Absolutely. I was there for that one.
Yeah, Mike was on there as well, so he probably doesn't remember it.
I remember. Ish.
Ish.
It was a black thing.
He's still not sure what a monitor is, so got to forgive him a little bit on that one.
TV. It's the TV.
It's the TV part of the computer. Goes next to the hard drive and next to the keyboard.
Yeah. The thing.
Anyway.
Through SoundCloud, a little bit of different stats. We had 1,016 plays in total.
Nice.
Episode 7 was actually our most popular episode. That was the one that you and me, Aaron, did on the Commodore 64, which is one of my favorite pieces of technology over all time.
The good old Commodore 64, the retro episodes, is something that is close to my heart and also yours. So it's good to see that a lot of other people are sort of feeling that way as well.
Yeah, most of the views came from Australia, which is where we're located. We had over 500 views from Australia, and we had almost 400 come from America as well. So quite a big portion out of America. So shout out to our American friends. We hope you're still listening, and we hope you're enjoying it.
Yeehaw.
But and obviously a few listens here and there from just random countries across the globe, which is pretty cool.
We had everything from Serbia.
Yep.
A lot of countries you wouldn't expect to be listening to this. They were all listed there. There was quite a few across everything.
In Serbia, it is time to listen to Australian podcasts.
There goes all our Serbian viewers right there.
Absolutely.
Wait, don't go.
We're sorry. We're very sorry.
Das vidania, Mr. Bond.
And I guess while talking about the stats and that, I guess it's important to talk about the different mediums that we are across. So we obviously are on iTunes using the RSS feeds, which was set up by Aaron. So that was our easiest way of viewing it. But not everyone uses iTunes or wants to use it. The Android people was a lot harder. There wasn't a standard podcast application that everyone seemed to use. The Google Play side of things, not available in Australia. So that made it quite hard. We did end up reaching out and finding a way to get on there, which certainly did increase the views. But we did also put it across all the other ones. We tried things like Podomatic and a lot of the other ones there. So there was quite a few different ones out there. But we did struggle to find specific ones that didn't have subscription fees on top of the ones that we were already paying to get it onto Android devices. So that's why we had the YouTube version of our podcast, because it was available to all users. It just wasn't as easy to put it through YouTube as it was through a podcast app, because you have to, without YouTube Red, you have to keep the application open to be able to listen to it, which wasn't ideal for a lot of viewers.
No, but as we go on, we'll continue to work on getting it out there across as many mediums as we can. Now that Google is sort of flexing its Australian muscle a little bit more, and maybe a little bit little bit, what would you say, not scared, but a little bit concerned that Amazon's now opened its doors in Australia. Maybe
a bit
we
more
will
confident,
see that.
would you say?
A bit more
Aggressive?
Aggressive, yeah. We may see Google Play Music actually and Google Play Podcasts come out here now very soon to sort of combat the Amazon Prime and obviously the the iTunes juggernaut that it is as well. So we will continue to work on that. In the meantime, if you are not geo-blocked by the boundless plains to share of Australia, you can get us on Google Play Music. It's just that you can't get us in Australia at the moment. So pop onto YouTube, where you can go directly to SoundCloud as well. So that's just pop into SoundCloud and search for the SOAP, and you can actually get your fix from there without having to have a iTunes account as well. So plenty of ways to get the content, and we're always working on making it easier and better to get it out there. So that will be one of the focuses this year, is to continue with our content production and how to actually, get it into the cars and radios and iPods and MP3 players of the masses.
One thing I would add there is that we have just recently started this year our own Reddit subreddit.
Oh, yes.
Which is a great place to give us feedback on things such as where we can place the podcast to make it easier for people to listen to. So if there is any advice out there that people would like to suggest or anything that they would like added, please hit us up on the Reddit. You find us under the SOAP there. We are very active. We always check it daily. So please jump on there, give us some feedback, join in the discussions. With the podcast ones, feel free to go off topic with them. If we do talk about something and you've got something of a similar nature of that, don't feel like you have to chat solely about that podcast. Feel free to just chat about it, whatever. We love talking about all things related to those podcasts and just in general getting our fans involved and giving us ideas, because if you talk about something off topic, chances are there's a good chance it may be a podcast in the future.
Yeah, and look, absolutely. And, we encourage talk across all of the different platforms as well. So we're not PC Master Race elitists or Xbox or PlayStation fanboys. And if you want to talk about Nintendo games, then I'm always up for a chat as well. So absolutely get on there. We've got Facebook as well and Twitter. We're all probably a little bit old to be doing the twit facing and the the U-books, but we're there anyway. So hit us up on social media, of course.
Now, the next thing I probably wanted to talk about, and this is great for people that are starting their own podcasts, or if you have got your own podcast, maybe there's something extra in there that you may not have known or that for it. But the biggest thing that I found when starting this was the equipment and the hours that I spent going through different people's opinions on what you should buy, what you shouldn't buy. I ended up with a list of a good 10 different microphones that were recommended, different headsets, mixers, non-mixers, USB, XLR. In the end, there was a lot of information and there wasn't really one clear point to find all that kind of information out. And so I probably want to spend a bit of time now just talking about the equipment that we used, where we started out with. And if you go back to those episodes in the very beginning, you should see the difference in equipment, the quality with it and that. Mind you, take note that it was edited, those episodes. So the experience you may have by buying that equipment may still require editing to sound at the same levels that we had it. So don't take it as a raw recording for those devices, but rather a possible endpoint for where you could get to it. Aaron, do you want to maybe start about your equipment, where you started, what you bought, what you bought after that, how you did it?
So when we first got cracking and discussed doing the podcast, I had, the old gaming headsets, nothing sort of studio quality or even geared to doing anything other than questioning people's mothers' sexuality on things like Dota and Call of Duty. So it was basically a Chinese brand called S.O.A.P, and I don't know if anyone is familiar with it. You don't get a lot of them in Australia, but they are quite good. I had the S.O.A.P SA903 headset and mic, so just a standard sort of headset with a fold-down mic. It cost me about $50 a couple of years ago, and it's a USB powered sort of setup. I found it did quite well, and it was the one that I used for most of the podcast year last year. There were a couple of episodes where I actually used a more cut down version, the old Logitech sort of Skype headsets, because there was some problems with some of my hardware, and it definitely shows. Like, the quality just wasn't there. I believe those web headsets went over to Mike because he had a lot of problems with technology due to his anti-technology aura that he carries around with him. So we tried a lot of different things, and I believe he used them for an episode or two, and we basically binned them because they didn't sound very good. I was quite happy with how my headset mic and headphones went. I found I didn't get a lot of bleed in the headset into the microphone. We will talk about that a bit more in detail shortly, Dan, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So just keep that in the back of your mind.
With that headset, is that the one that you didn't use drivers for because the drivers actually made it worse?
Yes, absolutely. I downloaded the USB driver, not that we need it in Windows 7 or 10, but I thought just for shits and giggles I'd download it and see what it did, and it had, dynamic bass boost and microphone enhancer and surround sound emulation, and it actually made me sound worse than when I was just using the generic Windows drivers. So that driver came back off the machine very quickly, and just basically used the standard Windows headset driver. And I'm actually debuting a new microphone tonight, so hopefully it doesn't sound too bad and it's not very noisy. This is a BM300 condenser microphone, which is currently not running over phantom power. It's just running directly into my PC. Doesn't sound too bad, and I've also dragged out my very nice Sony monitor headphones, which I've had for a few years now. The MDR 10RCs, which you probably can't buy anymore, but were about $300 Australian back when I bought them, and they're a really nice set of over-the-ear headphones. The BM300 condenser mic is about $40 US, by the way. So basically just sits on a old-school microphone stand in front of me, and it's one of the sort of shorter, stubby mics that you see most, YouTubers or vloggers have sort of hanging off their desks. So at the moment, that's where I'm at. I've had a couple of different ideas. Obviously, I've tried to keep my equipment as cheap and cheerful as possible. Maybe not cheap and nasty, but definitely cheap and cheerful. So that's where I'm at the moment. So I'm definitely going to continue looking at new ways to record, but I'm also looking at ways to save money for beer as well. So
Always important.
that's where I'm at the moment.
Mike, what about you? Where did you start with? We know you're not very good with the technology side. When I say not so good with it, it's not that you can't use it, you just have a habit of breaking a lot of things. Where did you start with? What did you try out? Where have you ended up now?
I started with I started out with a microphone, I'm guessing, obviously. A dodgy headset, I believe it was. I'm not quite sure.
I believe, if I remember correctly, you had an old Logitech web communicator headset. Does that sound about right?
I got no idea. Probably it is. And it was, as far as I'm aware, it was terrible. Sorry, according to you guys, it was terrible. And according to me, it was, I don't know, it was just technology. So, as viewers, readers, and listeners and audioers are aware, my technology is minus 500. So, I can't really explain it. But nowadays, I'm running on, well, let's just call it a good microphone. Aaron will give you specifics, and semi-decent headphones right now. I'm really looking at getting a proper microphone stand. I think is probably the next on the list, and it'll be a lot nicer, and I'll feel a bit more like I'm at a radio show, and I'll be a bit better, I suppose. My technology is getting a bit better every time I do something with technology.
Bit by bit.
And then every now and then I'll like fuck it up and be like, I broke it. Dan, help me.
Well, Aaron, we'll throw back to you. I believe you worked on his computer a few times just to keep him running.
Yes.
What kind of equipment? I'm pretty sure it was a Logitech headset, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was an old Logitech sort of Skype-ish kind of headset. It wasn't a gaming headset. It was, just the very thin headphones and the terrible microphone on it with just the headphone and microphone plug at the end. And we persevered for that for a little while, and then I handed down another sort of better, bad quality Logitech web communicator headset that I'd been using to Mike, and we actually, because his laptop, and I'm going to nerd out a little bit here, his laptop had a single 3.5mm plug for both microphone and headphones, as laptops often do, so it didn't have the two separate ones, whereas the Logitech headphones had the two separate plugs, one for a microphone, one for a headphone. I ended up getting some adapters that would adapt the two plugs into one for Mike's laptop, and the holes on the adapter were too close, so I couldn't get both of the plugs into the adapter, and I remember one afternoon at Mike's place sanding down the sides of the plugs so we could kind of squeeze them both into the adapter and get him working, and that went okay for a couple of weeks, and then of course something happened. There was a laptop rebuild, there were some files lost, and then I believe, Mike, you started using your PlayStation 4 headset?
Yes.
Was that what you were using?
Yeah, recently
or your
it was a
Xbox?
PlayStation 4.
Yeah, which wasn't too bad, but it had this random sort of thumping noise, and I don't know whether it was haunted or...
Had the buzz, there
yeah.
was like an electrical current going through it, even though there wasn't.
Yeah, so Mike's been through a few iterations of both hardware and software to get him where he is today, and as he mentioned before, I have the details here. So Mike now has the audio-technica ATR 2100 USB cardioid dynamic USB/XLR microphone, which is making him sound a lot better, and there's no hum, there's no hiss, there's no random thumps and dumps and lumps, apart from when Mike moves his admittedly inadequate little tiny microphone stand that came with it. Did you see that, Dan?
Yeah, I did.
It's like one of those tiny little ones. It's about 30 centimeters high and sits on a desk. So we will get a proper mic stand for you, and that does make you feel much more professional. My new microphone came with a stand as well, and I'm rocking it out tonight. So it's really nice. I'm pointing at the screen. I'm making all these hand gestures just so everyone that's listening with me and watching can get my point, because everyone can see me, which is something I do at work. But I digress again. So Mike's moved on. I believe the Audio-Technica was around the...
It was $90. I know this because
$90?
I organised it for him.
Yes, and it's USB, so plug and play.
It's USB and XLR, so you've got the option for it, which makes it very versatile. So for people who just want a very basic setup, you can use the USB settings for it. If you wanted to then add a mixer or that kind of stuff, it has the XLR stuff there for it, so it's upgradable in the future in terms of that. The reason that we ended up getting that one for him was because it's a very sturdy microphone, no extra features, that kind of stuff. It's pretty much just a bare bones microphone that does sound quite great. Looked for quite a while through very many posts and that as to what was the best kind of microphone for someone that was as basic as possible. They did talk about the Yeti and that kind of stuff, but it did have all the extra features on it. We wanted to try and keep it simple for him. So that one's very much like a stage mic, like you'd see, someone up on a big stage holding, for those who don't know what it looks like. And yeah, it's just basic, sounds great, and it was a cheaper microphone than the other one. So it was only $90 for it. You can grab it through PC Case Gear, eBay, all that kind of stuff, like all the usual places. But that one is definitely one that I would recommend for someone who wants decent quality without paying too much. But there are certainly better microphones out there. And obviously, as we've talked about, there's definitely cheaper ones. You do get what you pay for out of it.
Yeah, it's the old story, isn't it? You get what you pay for. But Mike, that microphone hasn't caught on fire yet or anything, has it?
Not yet.
Excellent. I'd call it a success then. So Dan is totally right. If you just want a no thrills, good sounding microphone, then definitely have a look at the Audio-Technica. And also apparently doesn't catch fire, which is nice because it's about the only thing Mike's equipment hasn't done. And now I've said that, it's going to happen, isn't it?
It is getting a bit warm at the moment.
But all right, well, look, back on track. So, what about you, Dan? What's your evolution of equipment been over the past 12 months?
Yeah, the main thing for me was I spent a lot of hours looking up, and I found so many different opinions, different microphones that people could use. So when we first started this out, I had no idea. I was like, I want to try and do this as well as possible, but I got no idea what I'm doing. I don't know which microphone's best. For me, a microphone was a microphone. So I had, in the very beginning, my Corsair Vengeance 2000 headset, an old gaming one that ran over Bluetooth. But by the time we actually started the podcast, I jumped onto eBay and grabbed a quick condenser mic. From what I read, condenser microphones were the ones to use. So I was like, well, that's what everyone says. Let's go grab one. And I had a bit of an experience with it. I bought the BM800. Which I still have with me. It is still a great microphone, but I had to learn a little bit about phantom power, how to get it set up and that. So when I bought it, it didn't really do what I wanted it to do. You couldn't hear it because there was no phantom power to it. The quality wasn't that perfect or that with it. So very quickly after that, I ended up grabbing the Behringer Q502 USB mixer. That cost me $109 at the time. You'll find it floating just above $100 if you look in the right places. That has XLR input for it as well as a lot of other ones, but the important thing was it had some very basic equalizer functions on it, which enabled me to get the voice sounding as good as possible. Gives me the ability to boost the volume up there, and if I need to, I can actually add a second microphone to a recording, which means that for a one-on-one podcast, if I know the person, if they're in the area, then I can do it in the same room, which is a lot easier than doing it over. At the moment, we use Discord to do it, but we've also tried Skype. When we did Skype, Aaron, if you remember, we tried recording everyone at the same time. That was a mess.
That was
because people would talk over each other. The quality wasn't so great. There was a lot of issues with it, and in particular, you can't see people. You don't know when they're going to talk. You can't put your hand up and be like, I want to say something. So you find people talk over the top of each other all the time. If you have just one file recorded from the Skype chat, then you can't edit all of that out. You just have a whole lot of mess going over there. I'm sure you can attest to it, Aaron.
Oh, look, absolutely. It was a good idea at the time. We're like, yeah, let's just all get on Skype and then record the output of my computer and it'll be fine and we'll just cut out the bits we didn't want. But, of course, because, like you said, Dan, we can't see each other, so we talked over each other all the time. If I cut out a piece of, say, you not being relevant or, just whatever, often it would cut out the main conversation as well. So that became an absolute chore and something that we didn't really do many times. So we decided to go down the Discord route because Discord does have a better audio codec and it does sound a bit better when you're on the chat. So we just soon discovered that everyone recording their own tracks and then putting it together a bit later on was a much better method, if a little bit more time consuming than editing one track or just getting the raw podcast and sticking some music at the start and the end and putting it out there and going, here we are. We actually did do some editing, some EQ and the separate tracks. So that would lead us into probably another conversation that we'll have tonight is the software and how we did the editing. But on the whole, that's where we were. That's why we've been using Discord, and we find that it's quite good.
Yeah, and I mean the whole thing there is that with the quality of the microphones, there's always background noise. The cheaper the microphone, the more the background noise in it. If you go back to the very original episodes, me in particular, I have in the summer periods a plague of crickets that sit right outside my window and are very, very loud. So I apologize to those people in the original episodes. There was literally no way that we could silence them out. So you did have to put up with all the crickets and some of the background noise. And depending on who was recording and where they were recording, there's other people in houses that would make noise that we just couldn't stop. You know, people in kitchens, that kind of thing. It's just a fact of life. And when you're not recording in a studio, these kind of things are going to happen. And that's where the quality of the microphone really becomes important. So the BM800 was a great starting point. It cost me $36 for it, and then the $109 for the mixer. But the background noise was definitely a huge issue. So as of this episode, I've upgraded to the Rode Procaster. Now those are about $168, depending on where you grab them from. Huge difference in quality of sound. In particular, the lack of background noise. I guess we'll find out once we're finished editing this one, but there is still a plague of crickets occurring right now, but I'm told that you can't actually hear them, and I'm hoping that's the case. I also have a very squeaky chair, so whenever I lean back or forwards, the chair makes a very audible squeak, and I'm told that that's not coming through as well. And that's all thanks to the Rode Procaster alone. It's got nothing to do with the mixer. A high quality microphone will give you great quality sound as you're talking, but it will also save you on all that background noise. So I'd highly recommend something like the Procaster. If you are starting out, then by all means use a cheap microphone, but as soon as you're ready to really do this full time, not just for 1 or 2 episodes, but you want to go on long term, then 100% save the money. Grab something like the Procaster. There's an actual podcaster USB version of it if you don't want to buy a mixer, or something of that kind of level, because it will definitely be worth every dollar.
Good advice. And like you said before, you do get what you pay for. If you don't want to spend your entire sort of free time EQing, doing noise reduction and trying to make people sound like they're not sitting in a bathtub, then yeah, definitely spend a few dollars more on your microphone. I mean, when I started with the headsets with me and Mike, I spent a lot of time trying to make it sound less shit, and it could have been better spent on editing or doing graphics for the podcast or anything else other than doing EQ. So if you can afford it and you are going to take the plunge, then definitely spend a few more dollars on a microphone.
Some of the other equipment that I did use, I do have an arm that didn't come with my specific microphone, but I did purchase off eBay. So in terms of Mike with his little tripod that came with it, for people like that do need an upgrade, go on eBay. You will find them cheap. But once again, the more money you spend, normally the better quality of equipment that you're going to get. So mine is a very basic arm. It does enough just for me to be able to put it where I want it to be whilst recording and then get it out of the way when I'm done. Just attaches to the side of my desk. Very easy to obtain. The other thing that we had to work out for equipment wise was also for the video side of things. Most of that was done just on our phones. We did play around with different angles and that kind of stuff. Once again, you want to try and minimize that editing because that's the biggest thing you can do. So the less camera angles, shots, and that kind of thing that you'd have to do, then the less time you're going to spend editing it. You can also buy things like green screens and that through eBay. They're very cheap. You can buy a whole kit with umbrellas, green screens, and all that for under $100. Having the setup for where you record is always going to be important in terms of the noise that's going to bounce around. Phones don't have the best microphone on them, so you do have to do a bit of editing with that. But also just the angle, how the video is going to look. You don't want to have to cut it down, shrink the sides in or anything like that because there's something just on one side that you were trying to avoid. You really want to get that camera angle perfect, and to do that, you normally want to set up a specific area for recording a video setup. Now, that may just be your couch for it, but you may want to do a whole room setup, have a table set up, all that kind of stuff. That one's going to be a bit of a personal preference, but once again, eBay is the place to start, and the more money you spend, the better the quality is going to be.
And it helps if your videos aren't hosted by someone that's 7 foot tall and someone that's 5 foot tall as well. We've discovered that. Mike towers head over me when we do some of our unboxings, so more than once Mike's had to kneel to try and get the height discrepancy right, but of course the joys of making videos.
Mike, is there any advice that you can give to people to be less tall?
Stop hanging around short people.
Okay.
That's
Good advice.
find taller people, and you shall be the short person. There you go.
So it's like, you hang around the taller people and you're the shortest because you're not as tall as everyone else.
6 foot is no longer like tall. It's 6'4".
It's average.
He's like, you're a little guy. You're like,
So that's sort of the equipment side of things. I guess the next thing we should probably have a chat about is what we use. And not in the equipment side of things, I mean software and editing suites and how our process works. And I know it's quite different between myself and you, Dan. I do things completely differently to you in both my video and sound editing, but
I like to think of it as a mark that you put on your own kind of editing. Like you feel like you've got your own little flair to it. So when I record mine, I'm like, oh, that's mine. It sounds just like that. I know that's mine. Whereas when you do it, I hope you feel the same. It's like, I've done it this way.
Yep.
I feel like that's a little part of me in that episode.
That's how I always do it. Yes.
It's like you're a director.
Yeah. It's kind of like Rob Liefeld in comics. Can't draw hands or feet. You always know when he's done the art.
Well, we turn to you first for the editing because you're a bit better with tech and you had a bit more background knowledge, even though it wasn't something that you'd particularly done as a career or anything like that. Can you tell us where you started? Because you gave us all the initial advice on what we should record with and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, I initially started way back in high school. I'm not going to give you guys a whole bio or anything. It just bore the pants off everyone. But doing a lot of theatrical stuff, so sound and lighting, backstage, spotlight work like that. I was always interested in the techie side of stuff. So I kind of kept that up throughout my adult life and worked with local theatrical societies and did some live sound mixing and did some live bands as well. Never really did any recording or sit down and, fine tune anything other than, some guys on stage doing a musical or a few blokes belting out some Cold Chisel covers. But sort of took that knowledge and said, well, it can't be that much difference to live. And I was somewhat wrong. But learnt very quickly. I mean, at least I knew most of the concepts and most of the sort of ways to do things were familiar to me. And if they weren't, they came quite quickly. As you may tell, I do like to save a lot of my pennies to buy beer with rather than purchase equipment or software. So I do use Audacity, which is a free piece of software. Now, Dan doesn't use Audacity. He doesn't like it. He uses...
We don't get along.
Adobe, but that's completely fine. I mean, they're both a means to an end. I prefer a couple of features in Audacity over the Adobe Audition suite as well. I mean, not to get into too much detail, but there is a one-click lock feature of Audacity, which means if I've got mine, Dan's, Mike's, Arthur's and Cav's audio all open on separate channels and I want to cut out a period of silence, I can cut it from one track and it will cut it from all 5, which does cut down the editing time quite considerably. It's called Sync Lock and I love that feature. There's also a really good noise reduction feature, which hopefully once our equipment upgrades continue, we will have to use less and less and less. But I've sort of schooled myself on how to use Audacity in the last 12 months. I've done little bits here and there, making just like joke videos with a bit of a soundtrack to roast someone on Facebook or something like that, but never anything as hardcore as a 1 hour long podcast with multiple microphones that all need to be leveled out, EQ'd and put together and make it sound like something at the end of the day. Now, Dan was talking about our own personal signature or fingerprint on the podcasts, and if you've listened to a few of them, you will notice that some do have background music, and they are the ones that I put together. That probably comes from the time I did spend doing a little bit of community radio with a friend way back in the day, and it was just one night a week for about 6 months. He was doing some sort of work experience, so I went and helped, and they always play a little bit of background noise just to get rid of the noise of the room. You'll often find that in a room, it will have a bit of an echo and a bit of reverb, and you can hear that. So a little bit of background noise softens everything up, and it also covers the hiss and the pops and the clicks that were inherent in our earlier podcasts as well. So it kind of smoothed things out a little bit, and it's kind of stayed with my style on the podcast now. So if you're ever listening to a podcast and it does have music in the background, it's probably me that's edited that one. So for better or for worse, we do have two styles of podcast. One that's done with Audacity, which is a free editing software, which is fairly fully featured. I mean, you can get plugins and a lot of free like upgrades. For instance, there's a dynamic compressor that I use when I'm doing my final mastering to compress and make us sound a little bit more punchy, which is a plugin. It's not there normally, and it's been just created by one of the community, and I think it does a great job, and it's comparable to some of the features in Adobe what's it called again, Dan? Premiere. Audition. No, Premiere is the video one, isn't it? Yeah, okay, I got a bit confused there. But Audition, and I mean, Audition is much more powerful if you want to get right down to the nitty-gritty and nuts and bolts. You can do a heap more on Audition, but I found that I can pretty much do what I need in Audacity. So that's where that is at the moment, and I will still be using Audacity this year. So not much is going to change, but if you do have a request for the background music, pop it in the Reddit, and I might be able to slide it in there if we can get it past YouTube.
With that, I guess the important thing to talk about is that Audacity is a free one, whereas all the Adobe products, they're paid for. If you're lucky enough, you might be able to find one of the old versions, or the new ones are now subscription-based. So it is something to consider when doing it. If you're just starting out, start with Audacity. Use that because it is free. It will do the very basic things that you need. I stopped using it because I had software troubles with it, which nobody else seemed to have that same kind of issues with it, which is what kind of forced me in the end to fix that up. Probably needed just to do a format or a reinstall of the application to fix those kind of problems, but I did end up looking at Audition. Audition does cover a lot more. There is definitely a lot more features and a lot more learning to do with it. Audacity, you can pick it up, record, and do a couple of quick things without having to really learn anything. Audition, though, you do really need to start looking at all the details, but the outcome that you can have can be a lot more professional as a result of it. So for people that are looking at doing it long term, I would definitely recommend it. But just understand that if you have no experience, you are going to spend a lot of time learning all the different features, how to do multi-tracks as opposed to single tracks, silencing things out, the ways that you can cut down things. The way that I cut down the silence gaps compared to how Aaron does it, I would say that it probably takes me a little bit longer. And going back to the different styles of how we edit and that, I do prefer the silence. When someone's not talking, I try and keep it as quiet as possible. With the cheaper equipment, that did mean silencing out a lot of background noise, a lot of hums, that kind of stuff. With the newer equipment, I do see that that's dropped down a fair bit, and hopefully this year that actually saves us a lot of hours in terms of time. But that comes down to personal preference. And how edited you want to have it is also going to be like a big factor. If you want to have it just raw, people talking over each other, that kind of thing, nothing wrong with it. Don't feel like you can't have your style being that way. But for me personally, I try and tidy it up. Because we do have multiple tracks, you can actually move audio just to the side a little bit so that people aren't talking over each other. And that gives you a bit more of a clearer, more professional sound, which makes us sound like we've rehearsed it a lot more than we actually have. Because in reality, we are winging a lot of it.
I don't think we've ever rehearsed it. If we have, I've missed every single rehearsal we've ever had.
And Mike slept through all of them.
Yes, absolutely. Dreaming of a time where there was less technology, more swords.
Less Arthur at his sleepy voice.
We did have to edit a couple of episodes with Mike where he actually did snore on some of the episodes. Mike, we should probably note, works a very different schedule to everyone else, so he has to be up a lot earlier, which means he falls asleep a lot earlier. And some of our podcasts did go past 11 p.m. and that, so it was a couple of hours until he had to actually be awake. I do apologize, Mike. We appreciate that you have stuck with it, though. You can tell how impressed he is.
Yeah, I think another early night for Mike coming up.
Yeah, it's every day is an early night.
Every day, yeah.
But yeah, Audition for the audio side of things and Premiere for the video. Aaron, I think you actually used Windows Movie Maker for a bit there to help put us on YouTube. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just rocking the free gear. Windows Movie Maker was a really underrated piece of software that came out of Windows 7, Vista, and early versions of Windows 10, and it wasn't overly powerful, but you could do star wipes, so that kept Homer Simpson happy. I don't know if anyone remembers that reference, but you could knock a couple of pieces of video together. You could put a soundtrack underneath it. You could edit it and then export it as a AVI or MOV file. And for what we were doing on YouTube, it was perfect. So basically, we just dropped the logo of the week in as our video, because you could just put a picture on there as well or run a slideshow, and just use the podcast as the audio, and then just set it to burn down to an MOV file or AVI and just chuck it straight on YouTube. It was absolutely brilliant. I mean, we didn't have to fart ass around with anything more complicated than that. I did play with a couple of other programs just to do that one function, because unfortunately YouTube doesn't have an upload music only function, which would make it much easier. But Windows Movie Maker is now no longer available on Windows for some reason. I don't know why they got rid of it, obviously because it was good and they didn't want people using it. And if you do have a Windows 7 or Windows 10 machine that still has it on it, do not format it, whatever you do, because you will not get it back. But me and Dan have spent a lot of time mucking around with Audition and the video editing tools, the Adobe video editing tools with the green screen kind of stuff, the cutting picture in picture, all of the stuff that mainly Dan has done on the videos that we've put up on YouTube. We've learnt on the fly, or we've sort of sat down and watched hours of YouTube tutorials, and I should maybe briefly touch on that as well. There's a few of our go-to YouTube channels which have taught us so much about audio editing and video editing, and even how to sort of put it all together, where we would be a lot further behind if we didn't have that resource. So don't ever sort of think that you can't search YouTube for how do I compress this microphone noise down, or how do I do a green screen, because it's out there on YouTube or on another site or on Reddit, wherever it may be. There's someone that's done it before you and someone that wants to tell you how to do it, and those resources are all free and readily available. So we've spent many hours watching YouTube and then going, okay, so this is how we do it, and then we'd go away and we'd do it. And there's a video of me dancing at work against an orange screen somewhere that was a test for some of our green screening and things like that. So that's the other thing. Don't be daunted. I mean, some of these programs look like mission control at NASA when you first load them up, and you'll find that you won't use a lot of the functions until you're sort of more grounded in what you need to do. But the tutorials on YouTube, and I harp on that, but if there's ever anything I can't do, first stop is, how do I do this in YouTube? So it's good advice.
I would also say with that one to bookmark the ones that you do like. There was a couple there that I found for equalizing, noise leveling, that kind of stuff. Bookmarking them, because whilst the videos give you so much information, you're never going to retain that first go. So follow it step by step, do it a couple of times, and then it's going to become muscle memory. But don't watch it once and assume that you're going to know exactly what they were talking about. Break it down bit by bit, follow the steps that they do show you. Save it for the next time that you have to do it, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to need it again.
Yep.
And half the time you spent half an hour looking just for that one video, if you need it again, you don't want to have to go through that whole search again.
Absolutely, and don't be afraid to skip ahead on videos as well. There's one guy we watch. We won't name any names or anything, but he's got long hair, and he's a bit of a dick and a bit of a condescending douche. But once you skip past all of that stuff on his videos, he's got some really good techniques and ideas. But it takes about the first 5 to 10 minutes of skipping sort of that bit of the video before you get there. So don't be afraid to skip through the videos. No one says that you have to watch them from start to end.
Definitely. All right, well, I guess we'll just touch a little bit on the other things that we've learned in general, just to wrap it up. Otherwise, we'll see Mike fall asleep on us. The first thing I think is the room, having it as a quiet room. That means no fans, no computers near your microphone, people doing other things if possible, no plagues of crickets outside your window, that kind of thing. Try and make sure that the room is as quiet as possible, because everything that's going on around you is normally going to go into your microphone unless you have a high quality one, which is going to make you spend so many more hours, or is going to be very hearable to all your viewers. So that would be my first advice, is to spend a little bit of time on finding the best location. And if it is going to be a noisy location, then look into ways that you can reduce it. There is plenty of guides out there, from throwing a doona around everything. I believe Arthur actually tried that at one point to try and cut down the sound around him, because he did have another person in the house and sometimes you would hear them there. If you want to spend money, you can obviously deck it out a bit more, but that's going to come down to where you're working, how much you know time you're going to spend on all of this, and if you actually have the money to invest in that. But keep the room as quiet as possible. Aaron, what did you think was the hardest part about the whole process of doing a podcast?
For me, would definitely be probably the editing. I can talk about anything and try and make jokes until the cows come home. So for me, it wasn't the sort of the stage fright or the, you know, what am I going to say on microphone, because that's no worries to me. I never worried about that. And it was like, when you asked me, did I want to do the podcast? I'm like, yeah, I can talk shit for an hour. That's easy. So that never worried me. It was more the editing sort of thing, because I kind of put my hand up and said, well, you know, I've done this and I've done that, and was like, oh, cool. Well, then you can edit everything. And the very steep learning curve that came with that was probably the hardest thing. And honestly, as I get older, I've got a family, I've got other commitments, and there was a change of job, last year as well. It does make you time poor, having all these commitments, and just sitting down and finding the time to get everything done, and not sort of let everyone else down, because you really do have to do it as a team. You can't just sort of go in on your own. So probably the editing, and actually just making enough time to get everything done and committing what I want to do something that I really enjoy as well, is probably the hard thing. So if you can sort of say to yourself, you know, Tuesday and Thursday afternoons are podcast, and stick to that, then you'll be okay. Whereas my hectic lifestyle, I was always just trying to cram an hour here, an hour there, and I've never been good with time, so this didn't help at all.
Yeah.
So try and schedule yourself, or get a butler or something to help you out. So
Yeah, that's definitely some good advice. And I think going hand in hand with that is balancing money versus time. If you don't have much time, you do want to spend more money to cut down all that editing time. If you have more time but not much money, then go for the cheaper equipment, but understand that you're going to spend a lot more time getting those episodes prepared, or all those kind of things that you want to try and eliminate are going to be showing through your podcast, which, like I said, for some people, it's going to be fine. It's all a learning experience and finding where you sit in that realm. You may want to have it raw and noisy and fun. That's your level, and that's fine. For us, we try and keep it a bit more calm and quieter, a bit easier listening on the ears and that for it. But that's all personal preference. One of the other things is probably about being prepared for episodes. Mike, I know you normally, whenever we say we're going to talk about this, you normally read up a little bit. What do you normally do to prepare for an episode?
I usually will search, Google search, whatever, find articles that are related to the topic, read up on that, and now I'm usually technology deficient, but I usually have like a pad, a laptop, my phone, all the articles around me ready to go.
Is there a normal thing? Is it just Google you use, or do you look for like Wikipedia or?
Yeah, all of the above, really. Option D. So whatever I can find, I'll use it to my advantage.
I would definitely say that Google will give you everything known to mankind for it, but Wikipedia is a safe go-to. If there's ever a mainstream topic, there is normally a Wikipedia page that will normally have a lot of information across a lot of topics, and it's normally in one place. So I would personally recommend Wikipedia for your topic if you ever want to do some research on it. And it depends on your podcast. Once again, your podcast may not have that kind of content for it, but if it is about a specific topic that is mainstream, Wikipedia is definitely the number one go-to. Anywhere else, Aaron, that you would recommend, or?
It depends on the podcast you're doing. If we were doing a podcast on native animals of the African savannah, then I'd definitely be sending you to the South African University section for animal studies or something, whereas ours is a more technology-based one. Obviously, go for the big names. So just using that reference again, you'd go with the World Wildlife Fund or the RSPCA or something to talk about endangered animals. You wouldn't go to poachersareus.com or something like that. You'd pick your medium quite well. For us, in the techie side of things, I would suggest the bigger tech sites like Gizmodo, Australian PC Gamer, Linus. If you haven't discovered Linus on Linus Tech Tips, get amongst him. He's on YouTube and one of the funniest and most informative casual sort of guys out there if you're looking to do a tech podcast. But I think you give good advice. Wikipedia and Google are always the two first places to go, and just do your research. If you read an article that sounds like the news is absolutely amazing and flabbergasting, maybe just double check before you sort of put it out there, because not everything you read or watch or hear on the internet, gasp, is true. So always do a little bit of homework.
Definitely. The last point I'd probably like to raise in regards to all of this in terms of learning and things to be aware of when starting a podcast is the team that you choose for it. Now, it's always great to invite as many people as possible in that, but the team that you choose is going to determine how easy it is to run the podcast. Editing is one thing, and you need a team that can all chip in for that kind of thing, but you want people who are enthusiastic as much as you are about it. So if you have an idea for a podcast, that's great. Make sure that the people that you invite onto the podcast are equally as enthusiastic as you. Otherwise, you're going to find that one person or some people are doing a lot more work than others, and then that's going to cause issues and strains on the whole team. So make sure everyone's enthusiastic about the same topics, or that you have a plan as to how to manage all that kind of stuff. Make sure the skill level is somewhere on level in terms of things like having to edit, run things and all that. If you have one person editing and everyone else, say you have a team of 5 like we started with, and we delegated everything over to Aaron to edit, it was way too much. It was too much for one person to edit 5 different people week in, week out. So make sure that this team that you include have the skills needed to get your podcast out. Now, that may mean that people each have their own skill or that everyone shares the same skill, but just make sure that the team balances itself out. And the last thing would be to make sure that you're all on the same page. It's the same idea for episodes. We changed our podcast multiple times because our group had multiple ideas about how we should do things. That's why we went from multi-topic podcasts. We started out with some things that were present topics, and then found that due to editing issues, we may not have made it out in time, and we actually lost a bit of content as a result of that. So make sure that you have the same idea, you know what you want to do, and that you're all working together towards the same thing.
And have fun with it.
Definitely.
It's not a job, it's not a chore. It's something you want to do. Otherwise you wouldn't sign up for the editing and the everything else that goes along with the podcast behind the scenes. Have fun with it. And if it's something you love and you want to talk to people about it, then do it. Get out there, do it, have fun with it. The fun shows through. There's a lot of manufactured content on YouTube and iTunes and stuff out there, and you can hear it. Like people talking about things, especially in the gaming industry. There's a lot of paid shills. They're like, oh yes, this new game from S.O.A.P is the greatest game I've ever played. The mechanic is wonderful, and it does show through. So be genuine in what you do, love what you do, and talk to people about it, I think, is probably where I was going to leave it with.
Mike, what about you? Any last parting advice for everyone?
Have a good group of techies.
Someone to cover your butt.
Yep, tech support.
That's really... that's how I got through this whole podcast business.
Well, actually, it's that probably brings me to a point, is that have some variety as well. Mike, you are the variety. The rest of us, we all kind of sit very similar kind of levels in terms of things we like, things we do, the way that we sound. You're the person who gives a bit of flavour.
Nerds. Sorry.
That's why we don't invite Aaron.
Quiet, nerd.
But yeah, no, so like obviously you have the interest there, you play games, I play games with you regularly, so you are on that level, but you are definitely a very different person to the rest of us. You give us a little bit of presence and a bit of fun, you do the voices, you do that kind of side of things. So definitely have someone like Mike in there who may need you to cover him on the tech side, but is going to add so much more on other levels.
Yeah, make me blush.
Especially the snoring.
The snoring, yes.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. We really do hope you enjoy this episode. We hope that you've learnt a little bit, just like we have. We hope you join us on Facebook, especially the Reddit. Get some chat going. Follow us on YouTube, because the YouTube does have extra content that you won't find on other mediums. And yeah, we hope to see you around for the rest of the year. Enjoy our episodes, and we hope to have a good year with everyone.
Thanks very much, guys, for listening. Thanks for the last 12 months, and here's to a few more, hey?
Hasta la vista, kiddies.
Perfect. Well, we'll end this episode with a few community feedback messages. So enjoy these messages and enjoy your night. Thank you.
Hey, this is Cav. I really enjoyed being on the podcast in 2017. I couldn't be on much due to family commitments, but I hope to be on there a lot more this year. I hope everybody's enjoying the content, because there'll be heaps more coming this year.
Hello everyone out there in podcast land, all three of you that might actually listen to us. Thanks for tuning in to season 1 of the S.O.A.P. At least I kind of think of it as season 1. I had a good amount of fun pretending I actually know anything about anything. And I hope to join you all next season again in 2018.
G'day, this is Mick. Really enjoyed being on the podcast last year, and I'm looking forward to doing it again. Looking forward to some new episodes coming up soon.
Hi guys, my name is Delphine and I love listening to the S.O.A.P podcast. I think 2017 was a great year for you guys. I continue to really enjoy the episodes. The content is really fun. It's really informative. I still learn stuff on things that I thought I knew already pretty well. And I find the style also non-patronizing, which is quite unique in that kind of podcast. Keep it going. I can't wait for more episodes in 2018. Bye! Salut, c'est Delphine et je vous encourage à écouter le podcast de S.O.A.P. C'est sur le contenu pop culture et c'est vraiment super sympa, les gens sont fans et je pense que vous apprendrez plein de trucs. Alors faites comme moi et écoutez le S.O.A.P podcast. Bye!
Hi, it's Anthony. Love listening to the show. Can't wait to hear more episodes. Good stuff.
Hey, it's Pip. Love listening to the S.O.A.P last year. Can't wait for more new episodes this year.
Hey everyone, this is Tammy. I really enjoyed listening to the S.O.A.P in 2017 and I cannot wait for more episodes.